In the last section of this course, we're going to look at custodial sentencing and how offenders are dealt with. By custodial sentencing, we mean prison sentences. And in this screencast, we're going to look at the aims of custodial sentencing and then other effects of custodial sentencing. So taking aims of custodial sentencing first, there are four main aims to custodial sentencing: deterrence, retribution, confinement, and rehabilitation. Now, deterrence works on the principles of operant conditioning, and the idea is it will prevent people from reoffending. So if we think of the custodial sentence as being the punishment, so the negative consequence for an action, the principles of operant conditioning would state that if somebody received that consequence, they would be less likely to then repeat the original behaviour. Retribution is focused much more around the victim or the family of the victim. And this is the idea that an offender should pay for their crime. So it's not so much about the preventing someone from reoffending. It's the idea that somebody should be punished for what they've done, and the victim or the victim's family would feel better as a result of that. The third aim, confinement, is more practical. So this is simply the idea that an offender is unable to commit other crimes while they're in prison. So it's to keep society safer. And rehabilitation involves having programs within prison which are designed to prevent recidivism, which is reoffending when an offender is actually released. Now, effects of custodial sentencing, obviously what we've just looked at in terms of aims, some of those are effects as well, things like reducing recidivism rates. However, there can be multiple other effects of custodial sentencing, and most of them are very negative. So if we have a look at some of those effects, de-individuation, we've met before, it's the loss of identity, and de-individuation can lead to things like aggression and dehumanisation of those around you. Other effects can include depression, self-harm and suicide, and this often comes from feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. In a prison environment, you have very little autonomy, and there's very little you can do in order to progress yourself, so that can lead to these feelings of depression, self-harm and suicide. Outside of prison, there are very often effects on the family, particularly if an offender has dependents or a partner who is financially dependent on them. Those financial and emotional stresses can continue outside of the prison with the offender's family. Another effect can be aggression or stress within the prison. So prisons are often overcrowded and there's very often a lack of privacy, all of which can build up to showing higher aggression rates. And lastly, institutionalisation, which is when someone becomes so used to the routine and having decisions made for them that they can lose their ability to make those decisions themselves, and they can lose confidence, which is very much a negative effect of institutionalisation. However, on the flip side of that, institutionalisation can be positive for some people. So if someone's living conditions on the outside are worse than they are in prison, prison can actually be quite an attractive alternative, and this could actually lead to people reoffending just so they can be put back into that prison environment. So does it work? Well, recidivism rates are actually quite high. So the Ministry of Justice in 2013 found that 57% of released offenders reoffended within 1 year, and that was just those that they caught. So it does suggest that maybe the rehabilitation aim of custodial sentencing doesn't work. Now, as to why this may not work, could it be because behaviourist principles aren't being adhered to? There is an argument that suggests that the punishment, i.e. the custodial sentence, is too distant in terms of time from when the action was actually being carried out, and therefore people associate the punishment with being caught rather than with the actual action itself. Other suggestions are that recidivism is high because there's a lack of support on release, and because there's a lot of mental health and addiction issues which aren't addressed either in prison or when people are released from prison. So you can look at more detail in the pre-reading for the aims and effects of custodial sentencing, but before you come into the lesson, make sure you can explain the four aims, you can explain the possible effects of custodial sentencing, and you can suggest why custodial sentencing may not be effective at reducing recidivism.